Hey everybody, in one of my more recent videos, I ended up talking about the esports organizations, how they put that letter together. There's 13 of them that basically unionized, that talked about complaints and disgruntled experiences and grievances that they had, and changes that they wanted to see come to the RLCS. That video did significantly better than I thought it was going to, and you guys had a ton of questions for me to answer. So that's what this video is going to be about, is answering those questions and kind of providing insight. I even took the time to reach out to a couple co-owners and owners of esports organizations to provide even more insight in their preferences and pros and cons of certain things for the questions that you guys had. Before we get into it though, I want to say massive thank you. I appreciate all the support on the latest videos. If you guys enjoy the esports content and the regular videos that I'm putting out, please make sure to subscribe and drop comments down below, as well as give the video a thumbs up. And maybe we'll make these Q&As more of a regular thing. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, first question up on the list. Ethan asks, how else can I support the Lawler brand besides subbing, liking, and watching the video? Quite honestly, man, I don't really ask for support other than like people just being here. If you guys have ever come by my Twitch channel, literally in my description, it doesn't say you have to talk and chat. You don't have to physically do anything. Just by supporting the content and watching is greatly appreciated. But quite honestly, word of mouth, man. Share it with your friends, family, whoever is willing to enjoy the content. I would greatly appreciate it. That was a wholesome ass question right at the beginning. Jeez. Shelly Jones asks, do you think this letter will have an impact on how Psyonix handles things in other regions like OC, SAM going forward? Not just regarding the issues discussed in the letter, but the overall well-being of the region. This one's kind of tough. This one's always been a weird scenario because Psyonix doesn't put a lot of focus on OCE and SAM. Even the productions and the way that the league play is handled is done through a different production company that is kind of self-sustaining. They let Grand Series handle itself, and then they in the past would let Throwdown take care of OCE, and now it's LPL Live. So they're a very hands-off approach. They just provide funding. I honestly don't think it's going to change much, which kind of sucks, because Psyonix has the RLCS, and that is like their brand. It is their entity, and they put a lot of effort into that because it's their production. They're footing the bill on all of it, and are more heavily invested in it. And the organizations that are banding together or that are signing together are all organizations from NA and EU. Even though I agree and would assume that the other organizations that are in SAM and OCE have the same issues, I just don't foresee it changing, which is kind of a silly thing. Until you see those organizations physically band together or say something or active about it, and it's got to be more than just the players. It's got to be an official notice, and the route that these guys went, I hate to say it, but I honestly don't think it's going to make a difference. Wegasaurus Rex says, why do you think there's been such a lack of content in recent years? Could it do with Psyonix and Epic Games, or is it something else? I assume by content you mean things in-game. Obviously, we recently got Heatseeker for the first time since Dropshot, which was awesome. That wasn't like a recycled use of assets. But I honestly believe it's more of like a fundamental or like a core belief of what Psyonix is invested in right now. I think a lot of it just has to do with them and their decisions to focus heavily on building revenue. It feels like the ideology behind the organization of Epic Psyonix has been focusing on pumping out content in the sense of items, crates, battle pass or rocket pass, and all those types of things away from the actual things that people want to play. It just feels like there's a mentality shift from community focus, doing what the community wants, community like it used to be. And it has all become focused on how can we make as much money as possible. And I hope that changes. Jock on this one asks, what are your thoughts on stuff for like how Lethmere can create all these modes and maps and game modes and has like 50 total-ish, but Sonic struggles out to bring new content to the public. Honestly, I think that they could do what they're doing at the moment while still also adding a new game mode and a new workshop map every week, regardless if people are like it or not. It's better than nothing. This one's got a lot to unpack. Originally, Psyonix put out the Rocket Labs map in rotation, and the issue was a multitude of things. Number one, it came out too early. The player base in general just wasn't good enough for maps like Neo Tokyo, where the ramps were on the side. Wasteland was poorly made. They went to the extreme route early. And not only was the fact that the player base wasn't good enough to do it, but it was also too extreme. This game is all about muscle memory and reading bounces and consistency in how the game performs with a physics-based engine. So anything that's new than that will not take flight. And not only did they go to the extreme with it, but they also introduced stuff like Wasteland and Neo Tokyo into the pro scene. And for the pros, when they're playing maps and practicing and scrimming if 9 times out of 10 they're going to be playing on a standard map, and then the 1 out of 10 time they're going to play on a non-standard map, you're automatically going to have people not want to spend time on it, and that creates an issue. It all stems from the fact that non-standard and standard are two different phrases. Those need to be one. They need to mesh, because if they don't, you're segregating what your player base is trying to do. Now, if they introduce like more of a map pick ban phase and they ended up making them an integral part of the competition, then yes, teams can see more of a Counter-Strike style where it's like, we're really good on cobblestone, so we're going to save that as our pocket pick to make sure if we need to come back in the series, we can. And then you would start to see a different meta. I, as an analyst, would love to be able to talk in Theorycraft about map picks and stats and history based upon how players play on certain maps and how they're going to utilize that later in a series. I think there's a lot of cool things they could have done. So I think a lot of the reason why they don't is because they were burned early on for a bad decision. And because it didn't work out in the beginning, rather than being like, okay, our mistake, let's make it better next time, they're just like, nope, it sucked. We didn't go well, never again. And it just got completely forgotten about. So I honestly believe it's because they were burned early and now they just don't want to risk it again. You are starting to see them try a couple different game modes, but the core element, the map and how it works, the shape, the size, everything is still the same. And I honestly think that if they went more of the Warcraft 3 Frozen Throne approach, a game that's been out for 2 decades, if they had custom maps and a workshop, Rocket League would easily become the biggest game in the world. Michigan29 asks, so how does owning a spot work? And I'm gonna kind of simplify this one. This was the question I got the most out of everybody. A lot of people were asking like more details. What exactly does this mean? A lot of people think it meant franchising, and that's definitely not the case. And even more so, as I mentioned in the intro, I reached out to a couple org owners and co-owners for more insight about what it means to them, the pros and cons and all the specifics. So I'm going to start with that. So these thoughts and everything are basically summarized. It's try to make it as simplistic as possible, but they prefer to remain anonymous, so I'm going to respect that wish. It all stems down to investment versus value. Right now, organizations are the reason RLCS is sustainable and kept professional. Could you imagine if every team was orgless, how much of a mess it would be? RLCS is a massive investment that continues to grow, and for organizations to want to continue to pay more, provide more support, and invest more financially, we need to have a sense of ownership of what we're investing in. It benefits the players because orgs will continue to invest and the player salaries will continue to inflate. He also mentioned Sonics and Epic would have to work as a mediator, but he and I both quickly agreed that clearly defined rules are probably the better idea. That's mostly due to experience reasons. The concept of the 2/3 rule came up in conversation as well, and he agreed that it's a tough one, especially with only 3 players being on the team. He said, I feel some sense of protection is important, but the rule hurts some teams' abilities to stay together and competitive at the highest level. He gave an example of Rainbow Six where orgs currently own the spots as well. They use the 2/5 rule, and during the mid-season, they enforce all contracts to end at the same date in the league. During that time, any adjustments can be made. The issue you can run into if orgs own the spot, including majority roster rule, is that at the end of the contract, what if players refuse to sign? Who does the spot go to? There's no real winning answer. You're taking the risk reward of not rewarding the orgs for investing and basically committing to that value, while players may make gut decisions. The more and more he and I discussed, what it really came down to is, do Sonics prefer to do business directly with 15 to 18-year-olds that are making decisions based upon the functionality and the success of their esport, or would they work with organizations that have experience over multiple titles and experience in general in the esports space, which Sonics is clearly lacking. We both agree that if some solid rules were put in beforehand, that he feel it could benefit everybody, given players protection and orgs a sense of ownership to invest heavily. And we've seen it in the past that without orgs, teams generally do disband in some sort of capacity. I can't go to specifics out of respect for keeping them anonymous, but I do want to say openly if they watch this video, I greatly appreciate taking the time to talk. Jeba asks, are you going to do a video ranking rosters going into Season 10? I can tell you in the past that I have always tried to cover basically a giant recap before the season starts. Anytime there's major roster changes, anytime there's stylistic differences that you see, I usually try to cover every single roster, talk about the changes and the things that happen, as well as provide insight analytically why this roster can be successful, the things that they're going to try to accomplish, play styles to look out for, a certain player to keep your eye on, certain things like that, just because with how often the rosters change, it's good to provide history, as well as try to give you something to pay attention to when you watch them in the coming season. But as of right now, we don't know when Season 10 is going to be. It hasn't been announced. So we're just kind of playing the waiting game, but Again, keep your eyes on the document I linked in the last video, and it'll stay up to date with all the things and all the rumors that are going on. Skybreaker asked, do you think Sonics is going to ignore us again or finally be proactive and make a big change? Being brutally honest, man, like it's do or die. They either make a big change or all these orgs pull out. There's no sustainability. There's no financial investment. And all those fan bases are gone. It will kill the esport. If all these orgs pull out, it sets a precedent. New orgs or orgs that would look to invest would kind of pay attention and be like, I don't want to get involved. If all these guys, even though Rocket League is the perfect esport, are willing to pull out, G2 included, why would we get involved? It's a scary thing to think about, man. I wasn't kidding in my last video. It is do or die time for Rocket League esports. Ant asks, on the esports shop, are you telling me that if I buy a Cloud9 decal, G2 will be getting some of that revenue? 100%. Yep, it's shared equally across, to my knowledge, all the ones that have agreed to the terms. 23 Shredder Gaming asks, what are your thoughts in viewer passes like CS and the way drops are implemented on Twitch? How do you improve the esports shop? Would you have, say, an item that is rotated on a mini page for each org, etc.? If you guys actually haven't seen Aspect RL, he did a mock-up, like a physical drawing of what the esports shop would look like if they took a lot of the community's ideas. I know Subpart and HD did a video on it. I did it a while back about things that would improve the esport, but it basically entails a lot of things that we've been asking for. A better viewer passes, abilities to look at other perspectives, whether you want to focus on a specific player or a specific team. The shop itself, I think, just needs an overhaul. I don't like the rotating store situation. I think you should just be able to pull up a tab, and if you want to support or buy an org's items, you should be able to buy them. I think it's beneficial for Psyonix, but I don't think it's beneficial for the orgs. I think my biggest complaint is I don't know how much my purchases are going towards things. If I knew exactly how much I spent would go towards a prize pool, I'd be more inclined to spend more. I think transparency, especially when you're going into buying things that affect other things, is super important. So I think the number one thing they need to do is release specifically how much money being spent goes towards it. Or if there's a certain thing you can buy where 100% of the profit goes towards the esport, it'd be a good way to separate and see how much money people are willing to put down now that they know that transparency is 100%. I hope in the future as well, I've talked with LeafX about this a lot, is I think it'd be really cool if they had a way to broadcast the game in VR where they sold like virtual reality seats. So there was a section where virtual reality was put up with a camera, and it would be as if you're at the event live, but you're at home and you buy a ticket for a VR headset. I think it'd be really cool, and it's something that we might see in the future, especially if this pandemic keeps going on. Tegozo asks, what about Epic? Can the orgs not also speak to Epic about these changes? I'm not the biggest fan of Epic, to be honest, but Psyonix does need to make some changes. Epic and Psyonix are the same thing. Now that Epic owns Psyonix, Psyonix is working under the willpower of Epic. What Epic wants, what Epic decides, it's up to Psyonix to fulfill those wishes. Usually when takeovers happen, it takes about 1.5 to 2 years for the changes to fully implement. So maybe we'll see some major updates here now that it's kind of starting to hit that time. Matt asks, do you think Psyonix will strive to boost community tournaments in the future? Put bluntly, yes. Big smile on my face on that one. Stay tuned for details. What do you think the chances of you joining as a caster for the RLCS or another Psyonix event are? Pretty minimal. This is kind of a weird one. Due to Psyonix letting me go, they have made a decision that they kind of have to stick with. It would feel kind of weird if they retracted their decision. The other thing I have is it would feel weird to me crawling back almost to the position, even though I love what I do. Psyonix, I think, needs to make sure they stick to their core guys. The guys that they have now are the ones that are going to get priority because that's the way it goes. So the only time you're going to see me do Rocket League casting again is if it is a community event or if it is not put on by Psyonix, like in the past E-League, WSOE, maybe ESPN will do something in the future. Stuff like that, they have the ability to hire and decide who they want their production team to be or their talent to be. Those are things that I'll probably have a better chance for, but specifically sanctioned Psyonix things like the RLCS or what have you are very minimal that I'll be doing. You better believe I'm going to do whatever I can in my power to pester people to make sure that we can go. Maybe ESPN will bring us out and cover interviews and do some cool behind-the-scenes stuff for you guys content-wise, because I always love to come and see and hang out with you guys when I can in the community. Austin Rapkins asks, with Epic's financial backing, would it be possible for Psyonix to sustain RLCS without orgs playing an essential role? I don't think so. The orgs provide a level of professionalism, as well as they bring in fans and viewer base, as well as their own sponsors and different demographics in that aspect. But the number one thing is professionalism. They take a little bit of the pressure off Psyonix. Without orgs, Psyonix is going to significantly have to bump up what they pay their players to play in the matches in order to keep those players incentivized and around. Orgs pick up a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to the financial side and the well-being of the players. And I do not think Psyonix ever wants to be solely responsible for that, because it is a lot of money. Plus, I can't honestly believe seeing teams named the Muffin Men be the name for every single team competing. It would just be like you wouldn't be able to take the league seriously. That does it for all the questions. Again, a massive shout out for you guys for taking the time to leave those questions so I can answer. It really helps me kind of define what I want the content to become, as well as provide what you guys want as well. So again, please, as always, continue to leave those questions and stuff. And if you guys enjoy this video, I guess bunch of thumbs up. If we hit a certain number, maybe that'll incentivize me to keep doing these. So again, the continued support is greatly appreciated, and more esports news and roster stuff to come. Peace.